hey, if you've come from the main channel, this is the full interview with Terry Wolfinger. Now, unfortunately, we experienced a couple technical issues during our recording, so I have cut a little bit out, but for the most part, this is the full discussion that we had, that I recorded, intact. Looks like we're at about the same levels now. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
All right, well, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Terry, you mind if I call you Terry, or what do you
It's
prefer?
fine. Is it Tegan?
It's Tigan.
Tigan.
Yeah. It's fine. Everyone goes through that with me.
Okay. Tigan.
Yeah.
Tigan.
Um,
Yeah, I enjoyed your documentary. That was fun.
Thank you. Thank you. I
I was
want
like, oh no.
um well, I wanted to say first of all, thank you so much for reaching out and agreeing to come on here and do an interview. I did one previously with Greg Off, and he was wonderful to have on. Um, so I was just ecstatic to see you messaging me. I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Is it Terry
Oh, great.
Wolfinger?"
Yeah. I watched Greg Goff interview too. That's the first one I watched, and I was like, oh. And so then I asked Tim if he could send me the link to the other one, and yeah,
Right. Thank you.
good
Well,
good stuff.
thank you. Well, uh, just to get started, if you could do a little introduction about who you are and maybe why you're here, how you're pertinent today.
Well, my name's Terry Wolfinger. I'm an artist. And the pertinence of this interview, I'm assuming, is way back when I was the art director slash illustrator for Game Fan magazine, uh, known as Die Hard Game Fan in the beginning years.
And you were a founding member of Game Fan, basically.
Technically, yes, yeah.
Yeah, you were on that first issue.
First issue, helped design some of the sections and obviously did that first cover.
hmm Yeah. So how did you? Well, first of all, before we even get to Game Fan, uh, what was your career in art before you met any of these people?
Let's see. I was an animator first. I went to school for character animation at CalArts, um, and I did animation for a few years, like maybe 3 or 4 years. During my last semester at college, I got involved with a an a heavy metal video magazine. This is circa like 89 or so. So it was sold on videotape, and it was a video magazine. So it was full of interviews and uncensored videos and things like that. It was kind of ahead of its time. And in between the articles and the interviews were these little animated bumpers, these little interstitials that would lead you to the next segment. And so I was in charge of doing those. Um, and the project was called Hard and Heavy, which is the confusion with George Weissing. I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah.
Thinking that I worked for Heavy Metal Magazine. I worked for a heavy metal video magazine
Yeah.
called Hard and Heavy, but
Yeah, that was such a funny part of the story, was that you were
yeah,
technically hired under false pretenses, not due to you, but because George misremembered what you said.
right, right. And so, I was getting these questions like, what's it like? I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. I've never worked there. Like, what? I'm like, oh, no, no.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, yeah, it was funny. So, I mean, I had bumped into George. I was just shopping at a local video game shop, and I had a leather jacket on that I had painted a big red skull on the back, and that's why George approached me and said, "Oh, are you an artist?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah." Yeah. I didn't know who he was. He didn't work there, and I was just like, "Why is this guy talking to me?" But so, but yeah, I'm jumping ahead, I guess. So I did animation for a little bit. Um, and then that project kind of ended, and I did some other animation for different companies, special effects animation. And I started working for a company that did special like movie trailers. Worked for them for a little bit. Um, and so I was kind of a freelance artist when George met me. But I had done all sorts of projects, worked on greeting cards, and um, I did a bunch of banners, like these big 5 foot by 10 foot banners for a comedy show in Las Vegas with Jimmy Walker. You know who that is.
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, I was kind of bouncing around.
How old were you at this time? Like late
Um,
80s?
when I met George, I was probably like maybe 23.
Oh wow, so you'd already that's quite a lot of work. I feel
Yeah.
like professionally. I'm 22 and I feel like
Oh,
it's got like
well, yeah, it's funny. When I was going to school, I noticed that the school had a job board,
Mhm.
where job listings would get posted to the board looking for artists. And I was like, are you kidding? You get paid for this? So I went out for every job, any job that came through, I went after just because, I didn't have any money. It's very expensive to go to school. I wasn't working because it was a very full uh, course load. Like I think it was 20, 22 credits or 28 credits per semester or something. I mean, I was in
Mhm.
school like all day.
So when George approached you about getting like a steady job working at a magazine, did that seem like a big opportunity? Is that why you took it?
It did. Well, he then, described, I liked video games, and it's funny, I was not really a video game magazine subscriber, or, I didn't really buy EGM or the other ones out there. And so he said that he and a few people were putting together a magazine. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Sure, yeah, I'll go down and check it out. And I met with Dave, and um, the infamous, hey, can you airbrush?
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, of course I can. I owned an airbrush. Um, and for some of my animation, I inked and painted my own cells for this other project, and I would use the airbrush for effects like smoke or, bursts of light or something. So I never really did, full on airbrush illustration per se,
Mhm.
but I knew how to use an airbrush.
Yeah, you
Um,
exaggerated a little.
yeah, when I had a teacher at college that brought in speakers, and this one speaker was like, "Hey, if you're up for a job and they ask if you can do something, just say yes, as long as it's within reason, like
Yeah, sure.
if it's like welding or something, you say
Yeah,
you're digging a hole there,
an
but
airbrush, it's kind of like a torch.
yeah, yeah, it could be just fill it with the right ingredients. Um, so yeah, I had done a few projects prior to Game Fan. I think I was working at a company, um, doing illustrations for a company that made novelty seasonal boxer shorts and socks.
Hmm, okay, yeah.
So I was doing like little Santa Clauses and Halloween scenes for different things.
Hmm.
Um, and then I had this opportunity, like, oh, we need an art director, and like, if it works out, blah blah blah. So I was asking some of my coworkers, some of the girls I worked with, like, should I take it? Should I take this job? I don't know how to be an art director. Like, I don't
Hmm.
know how to art direct a magazine. I was like, just do it. You'll figure it out. I'm like, okay. So yeah, as the story goes, I I brought in a portfolio of stuff that I had done, um, and they were asking if I could do. Um, they wanted to have a mascot character every month on the cover, kind of like Famitsu, I think.
Yeah.
Um, you know, introducing whatever game they were highlighting that month. Um, in this case, it was Monitor, the guy
Yeah.
with the TV head. So they wanted an airbrush look. And I said, sure, I can do that. And then, after meeting with them, went to the nearest art store, picked up that kit on how to do airbrush illustration.
Yeah.
Went home and practiced it, and yeah, that first project I did was terrible.
Oh,
It was just
really? You think
this.
so?
But I'm like, okay, I think I'm getting it. I think I got it down. And so, I was ready to kind of tackle the things they wanted me to do. They wanted me to airbrush a Sonic the Hedgehog. Um,
I think Bonk was one of them.
Bonk was one of them, yeah. And then kind of like a section header called like Savage Amusement, and it had one of the guys from one of the fighter games, um, not Street Fighter, the other guy, Joe something.
92? Maybe like Fatal Fury, Joe Higashi?
Maybe.
I
That
happen to
sounds
be a
familiar.
fighting game super fan, so.
Yeah, he had the baseball hat.
Oh, Terry. Yeah, from Fatal Fury. Terry Bogard.
Okay, that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like doing a punch, and there's like lightning.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that from the first issue.
And and so yeah, that was my assignment.
Mhm. Uh, so when you went in, did you kind of know what you were walking into? Because you weren't
Not really.
on the content or the step. You kind of got brought in to like do the art. How close were you to the other people around the office, like proximity wise? Like, did you know what was?
It,
Uh,
it it was a very small office, and it was basically in the back of a store.
mhm.
That it was the game store out front. So there was a big counter, and um, you know walls on each side with games, and then some games behind the counter too, and I think an arcade game or two in the front. Um, and then a door that led to the back room, and that's where the phones were and the mail order system. Dave had an office back there, and then there was like storage areas where they did all their shipping. Um, and it was, and they had a bathroom, but it was a very small, tight, tight
Mhm.
quarters. And there was a few guys. I met Tim, and oh, funny, backtracking a second. So I told George that I was interested, and he's like, "Yeah, great. Well, call me and we'll set up a meeting." And this goes along with one of the other stories that you covered. Suddenly, oh yeah, the owner of the company is really sick, so yeah, I'm not sure when you can come in and talk about this yet. I'm like, oh no, okay.
Oh, really?
So this is the Dave being sick.
Yeah. Again.
Well, I think it was the same sickness
Oh, sure.
that
Okay.
that,
Same.
that Tim was
Yeah.
encountering. It just overlapped onto me, and so I didn't think it was going to happen. I mean, I think it was maybe a month or two. And I'm like, okay, it was just some excited guy talking.
Mm.
But then he called me, and he's like, "Hey, I guess he's all better. He's back. Can you come in?" I'm like, sure, I'll come in. Like I said, go to this little place in Tarzana, and met with Dave. Julie was there, and they said, "Well, we'll pay you for these pieces. separate pieces, and if we like them, we'll use them and we'll pay you. I'm like, okay, fair enough. I forget what it was going to be. I don't know, 200, 300 a piece or something like that. Um, but yeah, I got a sense from everyone was very enthusiastic. I think I met Greg off too. I think he was there. Um, and it just seemed like, I don't know, I just got a feel, a vibe that the energy was just very positive, and it just felt like, you could sense their enthusiasm.
Hmm. What
So
what was your first impressions of Dave?
uh you know he seemed like a nice guy. The very first meeting, yeah, he just seemed like a nice guy. uh there wasn't any, you know hairs standing up on the back of my neck or anything like that. uh he's easy to talk to, and also enthusiastic about games, and about what the magazine was going to be. And so, you know his excitement was you know very infectious, if that's the right word.
Sure, yeah.
um
Mhm.
Later on, things would change as far as that goes.
Yeah, I'm. Was there a point where you kind of realized things were kind of run a little strangely at the company, or
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, I did that first, those things, and they really liked everything. And as you know, they did the cover, which was last minute, where I almost killed myself,
yeah.
um, a couple of times. Um, Sorry, what was the question again?
Was there a point where you kind of realized that things were maybe not in the best hands, or something wasn't
So,
right at the company?
so he wanted to bring me on full time, and back then I think he offered me 600 a week, which I was like, okay. And then I go to pick up my first paycheck, and it was only 500 a week. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, I thought you promised me 600 a week. It's like, oh, well, that's if you come in on Saturday. I'm like, oh, I'm like, okay, well, most people don't do a 6-day work week, but all right.
Was there a contract?
No, there was no contract,
It
I
was just
don't think.
verbal.
Yeah.
Huh, okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, I was 23, 24, whatever. Flying by the seat of my pants.
Yeah.
Um, um, there was one or two things that, like, so I brought in my own desk and a chair from and my own airbrush kit, my own compressor, and supplied, brought in my own stuff. They paid for the paints and stuff. But so my desk was on the other side of this door, and you'd have to walk all the way around to get into where Dave and the one computer was that they made the whole magazine on. Um, and there was one day I overheard him saying something to maybe Andrew Cockburn or someone else about uh, paychecks were going to be late, or something about the pay. And so I after that meeting, I kind of went in. I go, oh, hey Dave, so are are we not getting paid? I forget what it was that was said. He's like, and he said, oh, I never said that. And I'm like, oh, I was like, I
Hmm.
kind of heard you through the door. And then he kind of, there was a beat like, oh yeah, well, it's just because, XYZ. But there wasn't really any money problems in the beginning, for a little while, for me at least. I don't know about
Hmm.
anyone else. Um, and there were, you know, mostly I kept to myself because I was I had my little breathing mask on and, headphones usually because the compressor was like, and, so I was just kind of left alone for the most part. And, I do my work and then I go home. And then all the craziness would happen with everything being written, 3 nights before the magazine was due. And, everything was laid out, you know, a week before. So
Yeah. So you were a little bit removed from the craziness.
for the most part, when we went into the dedicated building, once they moved it to Woodland Hills into like just dedicated building for the magazine. They had more employees. They had a few more computers. Um, I was still airbrushing my covers for a little bit, and I'd be airbrushing this different section headers, and whoever needed a character avatar, I'd work on those. But at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, I didn't do layout, I didn't do uh, writing, so it's like, all right, put my 8 hours in, and I'd go home.
Okay.
But and yeah, more than once, I was like, all right, see you, part timer. It's like,
Oh.
you know, that kind of ridiculous stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you just because there were so many stories that I heard about people whose roles kind of like expanded
Yeah.
while they were working there, but it sounds like that didn't really happen to you. You were pretty much focused on the
Uh,
art.
yeah. I mean, I was asked to help out here and there sometimes. Like I did write a couple of the articles.
Hmm.
I never did the layout. I did layouts for a little bit, but I mean,
Mhm.
I didn't really enjoy it and
Yeah.
it wasn't my thing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about all the little characters, the little personas that the writers would have in the
Yes.
magazine. So what exactly was the process for coming up with those and implementing
A
them?
lot of times the each editor would have their want. But early on, Dave kind of dictated a little bit too, like, well, he's going to be this. Um, but like Kaylee, he wanted to be, kind of a Bruce Lee with the, Street Fighter, clothes and the karate gear. Um, you know, Andrew Cockburn was the Inquirer. That was his name, I guess, his character name. And they didn't really have an idea. So I just kind of made it look kind of like Andrew, you know. But yeah, a lot of times people would say like, "Oh, I want to be a knight and have a chainsaw for an arm," and so I go, okay, that sounds cool. That was Nightmare. So
Yeah.
David Hodgkins character, um, which was fun to do. And then I kind of embellished like my own stuff. Like I put a kilt on him and I painted the happy face on his chest and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But and a lot of times Dave would say like, "Oh, we need a character," because a lot of the characters were all written by Dave, but he could just like, "I'm going to use this character to be a little more mean, or this character is going to be a little more nice," or and I came up with a couple too. Like they needed a guy, a crazy mascot character that would read the mail every month, like would answer the mail. So we came up with the postmeister, and I just went home and drew this crazy, weird looking guy with goggles, and
Uh-huh.
um, and that was his catchphrase because I think there was a character on Saturday Night Live that was like, "Because I'm crazy." So we made him crazy,
Hmm.
which was fun. I liked drawing that one.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did you worked on the Adventures of Monitor comic?
Yes.
Yeah. So you were just like, that was all you doing all the illustration?
Yeah, and that was my idea too, because they needed pages to fill, and I was like, "Hey, how about we do like a little comic strip, maybe a page or two?" And they're like, "Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, we can
Yeah.
put Monitor in it, and we, came up Monitor's like the hero of, I'm going to protect the gamer from bad games. It was
Yeah.
very kind of tongue in cheek and goofy and funny, um, and it was a way to also promote games we wanted to promote, or kind of diss the ones we didn't like,
Mhm.
in a playful way. Um, but it was fun. Like Dave liked them, and people around the office liked them, and a lot of the readers liked that comic strip. But then, if one person wrote a letter saying like, "Oh, that Adventures of Monitor is stupid. You guys should get rid of that. It's just a waste of space," and Dave's like, oh, "Okay, we're gonna not do that anymore." So like,
Really?
okay, yeah.
Oh, wow. It's
So, it became more sporadic, and then it stopped for a little while. And then we brought it back after, I think after Dave left. Um, and that's when, a lot of fun was poked at E-Storm
yeah.
and his mullet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're uh, one of the things that really struck me about the magazine, and one of the reasons like the story overall was so compelling to me, was that it really had a lot of personality. Like other magazines, gaming magazines at the time, they had like, they had editorials. Sorry, they had editorials and little spots of personality and stuff. But GameFan was just full of these illustrations and this comic and storyline and all these characters, and it was all
Yeah,
your art style, so it all felt
right.
really like consistent, and like you really gave it a lot of character. And I think there's probably a lot of people who read it as kids or young adults, and you're kind of like almost the face of GameFan for those people. Um,
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
I mean, I'm pleased to hear that. Yes. I mean, especially needing a cover every month that was unique. I definitely would say that, yeah, I kind of helped create that style. Um, I didn't come up with the idea for having the avatars, but as time went on, I'd be like, hey, how about we do this for a character? Like I invented a handful of guys. I don't know if you remember Sergeant Gamer, he's some crazy Vietnam helicopter pilot that got into gaming. And so he was always having flashbacks of being in the war.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the storylines, Dave would say like, "Hey, we need a story about where the adventures of Monitor, they go into like a Doom kind of scenario where they're in the catacombs." And so, I would kind of come up with the ideas and the dialogue, and every now and then I'd say like, "Oh, what should a guy say here?" But I mean, good or bad, it was pretty much mostly me. And the stories did tend to get kind of weird towards the end. Like, I don't know if you've read all of them, but
I mean, I glanced through them, and a couple of them as I was reading through. Uh, I remember particularly, I think one of the last ones where like everyone died or something.
yeah. Well, that was the exodus of Dave,
Hmm.
and just all the shit that was going down. And so we had, you know, the villain of Monitor and GameFan was an entity called the Blowmeister. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it was a guy, sometimes it was just his corporate whatever, and they were out to sell bad games to people, and that was their whole thing. So they were always trying to stop GameFan.
Hmm.
And he sent like this weird, you think it's a child, but it turns out to be this weird, strange guy, and they fight him, and then it turns out he has a bomb inside him, and he blows up the building. And so all the people that left to go to Dave Halverson's new magazine
Yeah.
ended up dying in that
Yeah.
storyline. Except Eastorm, he
Yeah.
was he was brain damaged for
Oh yeah, I remember that.
like like uh Jay Perrier's character was Kid Fantastic, and he's like, I've got some bad news. Eastorm's alive, but he's now a vegetable. We cut to him. So we took a lot of stabs and like, okay,
Yeah.
you're gonna leave? Well, fuck you.
Did you share the kind of negative outlook a lot of people had of Dave at the time?
Yeah, I mean, he could be a really likable, gregarious guy. He was fun to talk to. He was funny, but yeah, you just never knew where you stood with him. And like other people have said, he'd say one thing to you and then turn around and say something completely different to someone else. And you know, all the stories from your documentary on GameFan are completely true. Like the money problems, the
Hmm.
the not being able to cash your payroll check
Yeah.
and having to call the bank to see how much money is in there. There was like a line where you could just type in random amounts, like, okay, 5,000 is in, because you'd have to say like, oh, I'm trying to cash a check for X amount of money. Like, I'm trying to cash a check for 5 grand. Yes, it'll clear. Okay. And then you call back. I'm trying to cash a check for 10 grand. That'll clear. I'm trying to cash a check for 20 grand. Oh, that's not okay. There's at least 10 grand. And so we'd all run to the cars and drive down there. And I can
Wow.
remember being in line at the teller. There's another employee at the next teller. You hand him the paycheck. I'd like to cash this. I'd like cash, please. I'm like, okay, let me get my manager to verify this. Oh, first she checked the amount. Okay, the amount's in there. I'll get my manager to sign off on this. Then she comes back, checks again. Oh, I'm sorry. The money's no longer in. Like someone like beat you by a second.
You're
You
looking at
look
the
over and
yeah
they're
the whole time.
sorry. You can't be mad at that guy, but you're just like,
Yeah.
okay, all right. But yeah, it got ridiculous. I mean, sometimes it was just a few days, but sometimes it was a week or two. I mean, there it was like weeks sometimes. I remember it being over a month sometimes.
That's what I
We
heard.
check to cash.
Yeah.
And so why did I want to stay there? You may ask. As you know, my dad invested some money into the magazine
Yeah.
way back when that was, I think, 3 months in. Um, my dad had inherited some money, and I told him about this opportunity, and I didn't think he was going to invest that much. And he's
Yeah.
like, "I'm gonna, I don't know, I'll just put 30 grand." I'm like, well, okay.
And it was 30 grand.
It was 30 grand, yeah.
Man.
And so I didn't want to just up and leave and like, sorry, Dad. So I
Yeah.
I wanted to stick it out um and see if we could just get it going. And when David Bergstein got involved. He was a venture capitalist and looking for something to put his money into. And he came along, and we were all kind of excited. And he did seem to know what he was doing. um, I I did get nervous at one point, and I had an opportunity to interview at Stan Winston Studio, the creature effects shop.
Yeah.
Um, the guy that made the Terminator and Predator, amongst dozens of other things. Uh, and so I got an interview with him, and he hired me that day. And I came back to work, and I said, "Hey guys, I'm sorry I'm putting in 2 weeks. I have this really amazing opportunity." And Dave was like, "What? What?" It's like, oh, I mean, he kind of understood. Um, I said, look, I'm happy to do the covers for you on a freelance basis. You know, covers, characters, I'll still do that for you guys. And which I did.
Hmm.
Um, and I did, I think I did get paid still. So, um, and then as luck would have it, I got laid off from staying with the studio about 6 months later.
Oh,
Uh, because I didn't really know that like in that industry, it's like after the big jobs end, people get left off and they go do
right.
other things,
Yeah.
and then they get brought back on. And
Yeah.
so um, I actually was being courted by Metropolis Publications, run by David Bergstein,
Hmm.
um, because Dave was like seeing some of the work I was doing. He's like, "Oh, we got to get Terry back. We got to get Terry back." And it's like, "Ah, Dave wants to get you back, and what we want to do is put you in charge of the video game development division of game." And I'm like, what? Like actually making and developing video games?
Can I hold you for 1 second? We're about to run out of
Sure.
meeting time. I think we have to start a new meeting. If
Oh,
that's
no
okay.
problem.
Are we back?
Hey, hey.
I think we're back. Okay. Seems like a pointless limitation, but okay.
But please ask any question you want. If you want to know about the acid in the coffee event,
Oh,
I was
I
actually
well, we can get there. Right now, I
I
want to
was
hear
actually
about.
there that night.
I
So
I want to hear about this video game development thing that you were going on. I'm really curious.
yeah, we're going off on the David Bergstein
Yeah,
tangent now.
no, I love it.
Okay. So where were we? Where did I leave off?
You said Bergstein wanted you for something at
Oh,
Metropolis,
yes.
something at the video game development department, or
They wanted to create a video game development wing to the game fan empire. And so, I was like, well, yeah, that's interesting. Let me know. And it was kind of, back and forth for a few months, like, yeah, I'm like, well, if you're serious and blah, 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 and let me know and put something together. And and they did eventually put something together for me, a package, and saying like I'd be the president of this company, basically. So I was 26. So I'm like, okay, yeah, this sounds amazing.
you had no game development experience or business
No,
experience? Just
no, I knew how
oh
to design
man.
characters. Yeah, you see where this is going, but I knew people that actually were in game development, because you meet people
Yeah.
through Game Fan and all the conventions we went through. So as luck would have it, like I said, I got laid off from Stan Winston Studio, and so I meet with David Bergson. I'm like, well, let's talk what you're gonna pay me, and so he laid it on the line, and like the money was crazy. So I was like, okay, well, all right.
Okay.
Got a lawyer, had him look over the contract. We went back and forth, signed the contract, and then the next day it stands. My supervisor, Mark Crash McCreary, comes in and is like, "Hey Terry, Stan just talked to me and he says, I don't know if I want to lose Terry. Actually, see if he wants to stay." And oh, I just signed a contract. So, and they're like, "Oh, okay, well, easy come, easy go." Like, all right, well, and then a month or so later, Stan calls me. He's like, "Hey, there's a project coming up. I think you'd be great for designing some characters for him." They it's in my contract. They don't want me doing any freelance. And he's like, "Oh, okay, well, change your mind." Like, so missed out on that. And then, of course, soon after, money problems started happening, um, with because at the time it seemed like Metropolis had gotten GameFan running, um, smoothly. They were actually making money and able to pay their print bills, and he was clearing up a lot of the the back debt that they had accrued, and finding out ways to get more money in and getting people to pay up debt. And so it was like it seemed like GameFan was doing a lot better. But so I'm trying to put together a team for this video game company, you know, found a producer and hired an art buddy of mine, and this producer hired a few buddies of his. But then, things just stopped happening,
Hmm.
and David Bergstein stopped taking my calls, and I'd have to go down to the office to get a hold of him, like, hey, well, what's going on? And long story short, the producer I hired like got into David's ear about I wasn't very significant to the company. And David was like, no, no, yeah, Terry's not significant, you know,
This is Dave Halverson or Bergstein?
Bergstein.
Ah.
And, the name of the company changed, and no longer was going to be a game that I wanted to make. It was a game that this guy wanted to make. And me, meanwhile, we had like one computer, no programmers. Like, I was tasked to find the building, handle parking, you know, like, like what? I'm supposed to be putting together a creative team. Can you get someone else to figure out who's going to pay for the parking spaces? It's like, anyway, it was a very frustrating experience, and this
Yeah.
this producer I hired ended up turning out to be a little rat. So I was like, okay, well, I saw the writing on the wall. I talked to my friend. I'm like, hey, I'm going back to GameFan, and I'm sorry, but you know, he's like, do what you got to do, man. And he was looking too, so he found a nice job in game development, and not long after this video game uh, production company folded.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, all right, have fun.
That's
Oh. It was very disappointing.
that's such a I never even heard anything about that in all my
Well,
research.
I mean,
No.
why would you? They never made anything. So.
Yeah, it was just this all these
they,
weird little side stories.
they they did publish one game only through this producer guy. Was like they looked around for other projects in development that were in trouble financially, and so they found one, and like, okay, we go in and we just fund them, and they finish the game, and we get to put our name on it.
Huh. What were they called? The company?
The company was called the Design League.
The Design League?
I know,
I
not
have
not my idea.
I have to look that up now.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you mentioned earlier, just because it's such a well-known story, the LSD story, if I could just get your perspective on that.
the LSD
Yeah, in the coffee pot.
in the coffee. So it was one of the rare nights where I was there working late, um, and Cybermorph had come in, and it was being reviewed and played. So Dave would usually play the game, and he'd have someone doing screen caps,
Mhm.
screen captures, which would happen to be George Weissing, and I think Tim might have been there too, and a handful of other people. And I just remember, I was finishing up some stuff, and I was getting ready to go home, and I just remember Dave going like, "This game, it knows what you're thinking," and he's just the little enemies. They can sense my thoughts. They knew I was gonna do that, and like I'm just like, wow. And I'm looking at the game like, it's kind of cool. It's 3D, and I was like, I don't remember George, tripping out that much, but yeah, Dave was just He was just burning. Like, how could they know? And so, I didn't put two and two together. I'd never done hard drugs like that. So
Did you
I
just only find out like after the fact that
found
that's
out
what
the
was?
next day,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, and it was true. George. Oh, so I guess what happened was how they found out it was Andrew that spiked the coffee. He was joking around about it that day. Like he had just scored some tabs or something and was like, oh, we should drop some in the coffee. Oh, that'd be funny. And I think it was like, I don't know, it was Kay Kaboki or someone was like, hey, I heard Andrew, because the next day they were just like, oh, what was that? And George had done those things and was like, you know, no, someone
Yeah.
I know this feeling. That wasn't
Yeah.
just out of the blue. So he found out Andrew Spike, and yeah, he wanted to kill him. He was just so.
Yes.
And Jay, Jay was kind of the managing guy. Dave was editor and chief publisher, but Jay was managing it or something. But he, kind of second in command. He's like, Dave, you got to get rid of Andrew. Like you got to fire him. That's So he was fired for like a month or two, but then he got brought back on.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was a weird thing with Andrew, uh, but he liked these younger guys. He just, I don't know, these kids. He was a kid. Like
Uh-huh.
when I first started working there, I don't think Andrew was even 18 yet. He might have been 17 or something.
Yeah. 16 or 17, I think, when he got
Yeah,
hired.
something like that. And a very kind of aggressive, in your face, like, yeah, huh? It's like, easy. I'm 24. Calm down. I have a driver's license. I can drive. I can run you over.
uh well, he did hit a
Oh
jogger that
God,
one
yeah,
time.
that's right. I was there. Yeah,
He
it was
knows
bizarre story after
he could,
bizarre
he
story with
could hit
that kid.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
uh
He got hit in the parking lot. Did anyone see the driver? I think it was Cogburn.
holy, oh my
Yeah.
god.
Yeah. So yeah, and he went to Japan on the fake visa. It was Guile
Guile
Riggs.
from Street Fighter.
Yeah, Riggs because Lethal Weapon was popular at the time, like
That's so
Riggs and Murtaugh. um, and yeah, it was unbelievable. He got into some serious trouble. Like some guys said, it was either FBI or some heavy government officials like, all right, you need to meet us at our offices. We need to talk about this. And they basically said, look, basically no one knows you're here right now. And the pretense was we could make you disappear because this passport shows you don't exist. Like,
whoa.
yeah, it was like this big, and he came back like, okay. Yeah, he was scared straight. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that was. There's another story that I don't think was mentioned in the threads, but
Oh, go ahead.
um, this is a more humorous one. But the bravado, Andrew Cockburn was all ego and like he was like the best Street Fighter player I'd ever seen. Like he was amazing. Like no one could beat him. Like it was just the more angry he got, the better he played. um. Anyway, so that was kind of his attitude. Like, oh yeah, oh yeah, you think you're tough. Um, so this guy brings in some hot sauce that he bought. I think it was called Dave's Insanity Sauce. It's one of those kind of engineered chili pepper sauces where it's
Yeah.
like 1,000 times hotter than a normal chili pepper.
Yeah.
Like one drop is enough to burn. So people like this guy he brought in this stuff and he put in like 2 drops into a normal thing of salsa and mixed it up. And people were like, oh my God, it's so hot. Oh, Andrew comes walking in. Oh, you guys are a bunch of pussies. Oh, that's nothing. Oh, I'm used to this stuff. Oh, I can do. And like, will you guys shut up if I drink a cup of this? And everyone's like, yes, we will all shut up if you drink a Dixie cup of this sauce. So he takes it undiluted. He's like, all right. We're just like, oh my God, is he gonna do it? Does it? And he's like, and instantly he knew it was a bad idea. The expression changes, breaks out into a sweat. His complexion changes. He's just like, oh, like almost crying. And he's like, whoa. Goes into the bathroom. You hear him throwing up. Like, he's drinking water. And he's just like, oh God. And he's just, what's up? We're all just dying. Like, oh, you showed us. Oh, so that was a good one. But yeah, so it was like, I think for the next day, he just was, he was not right. Like, he couldn't taste anything. Like,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you had any other fun stories from that time
um,
that you don't, maybe the ones that you think most people don't know, or
let's
maybe I didn't
see.
cover.
I I created a Monitor mascot costume
Oh,
um, that we wore that I wore because I built it on a 6 foot tall mannequin and no one else would fit it. So like aside from like Kaylee who didn't want to do it and I'm like, all right, it sounds like fun. I'll do it. And it was like, foam rubber construction. I built like kind of a muscle suit and then coated that with like a spandex kind of shiny thing and made a foam core helmet. Um, I tried to install a little fan that would work on batteries, but I didn't get the circuits right, and it just drained the battery in like a matter of seconds, and like so the thing was like an oven. And I think the first show we brought it to was E3 at Chicago, and yeah, I mean the foam rubber was like maybe 3 or 4 inches thick on this thing. So it was like wearing a very tight fitting sponge, and
jeez.
the thing was just soaking wet. Like I had it on for maybe a half an hour. We walked around. I'm like, I got to get this thing off. Like I had sweat stains coming through my chest.
Whoa.
It just was so gross. Like, like I almost passed out. Like I was just like, okay. Like, I gotta get this off. So,
Do you know where that is? Does it exist anymore?
it's in my garage.
It's in your garage?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I have the same mannequin that I built it on.
Whoa. That's the kind of.
Jay had it for a little bit,
Uh-huh.
because into the dark days of GameFan when all the money issues were happening, and I guess maybe they weren't paying the rent on the office building or something. I'm not sure why exactly, but we all showed up to work one morning. There's a big lock on the building, like chain, and it was either sheriffs or U.S. Marshals were in the parking lot. Couldn't go in the building. Everything was uh, closed off. Like they waited till all the employees showed up. Like, all right, you're able to go up and get your own effects. Don't take computers. Don't try to take anything. Um, so yeah, it was very surreal. I remember there was one of the newer employees. Like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to GameFan. I'm like, this hasn't been GameFan for a long time.
Of all
Like,
companies. Now that we're back, I want
got
to,
it.
ask you just a couple more questions. First off, I have to know, Do you do you still carry a gun with you when you go on road trips?
No.
No.
I mean, maybe. It's for you to find out.
Yeah.
Um, well, kind of the backstory. I was dating a girl back then, and like she had a shady ex-boyfriend that had just gotten out of jail and was like
Uh,
showing up at her house. I'm like, okay, well. So anyway, so that's part of it, yeah. Um, but yeah, like I said, I think I've just seen too many movies.
yeah.
Driving to the desert because we left at night, so it was like a 5 hour drive to Las Vegas.
That's yeah.
We didn't get into our hotel or our motel till like kind of 1 or 2 in the morning. So it was, and we were driving, and there's like four of us. Jay was driving, I was shotgun, a couple other people in the back. I think Tom Slick was in the back, and maybe Kai Kabogi. I'm not sure, but then we're driving. It's middle of nowhere, and then we go under this little underpass, I think, and there's just this guy in a poncho, just standing there.
Uh,
All right, did everyone see that? Like, he wasn't hitchhiking. He was just like, yeah, it was very. It wasn't raining or anything, so it was just very weird,
huh.
kind of spooky.
Yeah. That's pre-cell phone too, probably?
Yeah, way
Yeah,
pre-cell.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
barely
um
had internet.
uh
Uh, so yes, no, I don't. I don't.
not anymore. Um I wanted to ask you, how did you end up leaving GameFan, and was it on good terms?
Uh, After the shutdown, the lockdown, when the sheriffs, I mean, that was kind of it, I think, at least for a while.
Yeah.
Um, it was shut down for a good while. And I think I just started looking for other jobs, and I found a job in video game development with Way Forward Technologies. And they were looking for an animator. I was like, do you mean a 3D animator? And like, no, no, regular animator. Oh,
Oh,
I actually am qualified for that. So I went down there, and a couple of the other guys there had graduated from CalArts. So I was like,
cool.
did that for about a year.
What game was that?
Um, they were doing like computer game, like PC games, like nothing amazing. Uh, like they were doing like learning adventure type, kind of kid games.
Okay.
Um, they had the King and I learning adventure, and I think Lost in Space, the movie had just come out, so there was like a
Huh.
Lost in Space math game,
Yeah.
um, and some other one. And then there was like a sports game called, I think it was called Extreme Sports. So this is probably circa 98 or so, if you want to look it up. And it was all, and so that was all designed by me. I did all the animations and characters and stuff. And so it was kind of fun. But they were kind of a project to project company too. And they were
Yeah.
always like, oh, we got to get a new project in. And money was always kind of scary. And I had just come off Game Fan, and their unreliable paycheck. So I
Yeah.
kind of got cold feet and left and went to another opportunity. Company called Lucky Chicken Games.
Mhm.
I don't know if you heard of them. And I
No.
did, a friend of mine helped start that up. And so he kind of introduced me, and they liked me. And I worked on a handful of like Game Boy Advance games. And I did one PlayStation game. It was a Tyco RC car racing game called Tycho Assault with a Battery. So I did background designs and some of the car designs, and I was doing 3D modeling, like low poly 3D modeling.
Oh wow. Was that another thing? You said, yeah, I can do 3D modeling. You
I
went and
went
bought a
home, got a
book.
book,
Yeah.
bought the program. No. I actually was honest. I'm like, I've never done it. And then like, oh, it's easy. We'll train you. I'm like, okay,
Oh,
cool.
that's great.
And it was fairly easy. I picked it up pretty quickly, and they had their own whatchamacallit, 3D object shader or bitmap painter program.
Mhm.
Um, but I wished I'd stuck with the 3D stuff because I didn't, and now it's light years from then.
Yeah.
Where if I tried to jump back into it, I'd be like, how do you do this again?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Uh, do you think you learned anything valuable from your time at GameFan?
Uh, I learned to get things in writing. To
Yeah.
be, yeah, and to be very wary of amazing things that are offered you. If they're too good to be true, they might actually be. Um, but I can't complain. It set me on a path, and it did get my name out there. Like I think the reason I did a little better than most people, when people's paychecks were bouncing, and there's a lot of guys that were struggling where they needed that paycheck, but you know, I had my name out there a little bit, and people would hit me up to do a game ad or a magazine cover or a box cover. So, I did a handful of that too, freelance wise. Um, so yeah, I just, I did learn how to illustrate in Photoshop because
That's right.
I had not done that before. And to Game Fans' credit, or I should say to Tim Lindquist's credit, like he had the idea like to do all desktop publishing because that no other magazine was doing that. I don't
Yeah.
think. And then everyone started doing it. And he created the RGB system to grab the screen grabs and all that. But I remember asking him one day, he was cleaning up one of my airbrushed covers in the computer, like because sometimes you're doing the airbrush with the frisket peels, and you get a little place where it bled, or some of the paint comes up, and so he'd patch them up. I'm like, oh, so that little airbrush icon that works like an airbrush, huh?
Hmm.
He's like, yeah, you can change the pressure and sensitivities. He's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, is there a way to mask off certain areas? Like, yeah. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, huh, do you think maybe I could get on and just fool around with this for a little bit? And he's like, oh, absolutely. And so he was a big champion of getting me to do digital illustration. And so I think I was one of the first people doing that too. I don't know of many. There was a couple.
Yeah.
And I was doing it all with a mouse. And even my illustration work at Stan Winston, they had a computer with Photoshop, but not many people knew how to use it because no one was
Yeah.
illustrating with it except certain people. Yeah, so I was doing all this crazy stuff with a mouse.
Today, that's still impressive. Most people use tablets or if they really get
Yeah,
into it. But that is
so I'm a
that's
tablet guy now.
yeah.
But yeah, now you have a pressure sensitive, you do it lightly and you get a light dusting of the airbrush.
Hmm.
Harder you press, the more opaque it gets, stuff like that. So
I
hard to do with a mouse.
we're almost out of time again. Can we just like I'm gonna end and we're gonna rejoin should be the last time.
Hello, hello.
Okay, and now we're back again. And you can
Yes.
all right.
Chapter
Cool.
5.
Now, yeah, I just I just had one question. Well, like just like one or two, mainly about like your art. One thing I thought was really cool is that, and I have no idea how common this is, but you are actually colorblind.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how common it is either. The people I've told have usually been surprised. I said massively colorblind. I'm not massively colorblind, but it's
Mhm.
um I am colorblind. I forget what it is, the red green spectrum or something, but like certain color intensities can, like, a red can look brown, or a green can look
Mhm.
brown, or uh a purple can look blue. So it's funny because a lot of my personal art, I do portraits of pop art and pop culture stuff and monsters.
Yeah.
um, a lot of my colors are kind of saturated, but I kind of, it dawned on me like, oh yeah, it's so I can see them.
Oh.
Like, if the color saturation is subtle, then it's like, is that gray or is that green? Just
That's really
famous.
funny.
Yeah,
That's awesome, though. Because I think that's really cool. It's like a necessity for you.
I know. I mean, it's my profession is working with a color.
Yeah. No, I'm not colorblind, but I do use because I get like eye strain from looking at screens. So I use
Oh, me too. Yeah.
um like a blue light filter to kind of
Mm,
tint everything kind of orange. Which
right.
usually, I turn it off for a couple things, but recently for fun, I was doing some digital coloring of like manga panels,
Okay.
and I was trying to, color in like a skin tone, and I'm like, oh yeah, it looks like a skin tone. And then I sent it to like my girlfriend or something, and I looked at it later on my phone, and I was like, they look like Simpsons. It was like totally yellow, but it
Yeah.
looked way more, like a closer to like a skin tone of mine or something. Um,
Right.
so
That's
I had to
funny.
like turn it off when I'm picking out the colors and stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah. I can't use those screen tinters because of what I do. I need to
yeah.
be able to see the colors, and I have a hard enough time already. So yeah, my eyes are, I get eye strain all the time. They're kind of shot.
Yeah. Um,
Um, yeah, it's happened a few times where I've been kind of called out, like, what are you doing? Why can't you fix the stupid thing I'm asking you to fix? And I'm like, "Because I'm
I can't
colorblind."
see it.
It happened once at Stan Winston. I was doing some working on color schemes for the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World, and I was working with one of the sculptors, and he uh he was like, yeah, maybe just get rid of that orange area that you have in there. I'm like, oh, okay. And he comes back later. It's like, oh no, I wanted you to get rid of that orange area. I'm like, oh, yeah, got it. Like, can you stop now? Like, he didn't catch it. Um, like, one of the third careers in my career, I got into advertising because, uh, the box art, video game box art and magazine covers kind of started drying up, and I was like, well, why the hell are they drying up? Because a lot of these ad agencies were taking these jobs. So I went to work for a couple of those agencies, and so that's what I did for about 9 years. And it was all video game related stuff. So I've been in video games for a long time.
Mhm.
um, the one story about the colorblind, I was at work, and my creative director was asking me to get rid of the purple area. It's like, oh yeah, maybe just get rid of that purple area. I'm like, oh, okay, got it. And I knocked it down, I thought, and I was like, he comes back and I'm like, how's this? And he's like, it's still kind of there. Yeah, yeah, just here and here. Oh, okay, got it. And like, I think I asked him back 2 or 3 times, and we joked about it later, but he's like, God, like, why isn't he getting it? I don't understand. And I had to tell him, and he's like, oh, are you serious? He's like, oh man. And he's like, great. Like, my best illustrator is colorblind.
I think that's what I read Halverson's reaction. Well, we have a
Yeah,
colorblind artist.
yeah, yeah. And I think he was a little miffed at me. Like I should have told him that.
Oh yeah.
Jay thought it was awesome. He's like, "Oh, it's awesome, T." That was hilarious.
Yeah. There's
But yeah, Dave was
probably
kind of like,
yeah.
"I've been duped."
There was it more common back then to just assume that it meant like you couldn't see color at all? Or did people kind
I
of
I
know?
think like I remember in elementary school when I tell people like, instantly you get like, well, what color is this? Well, what color is that sign?
Yeah.
Red, blue. Like it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes if I'm not sure if I'm doing actual painting, I'll have to hold up something in that intense color range and like
Yeah.
I could be like, okay, it's not in the reds, it's actually in the greens, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and which is why I got better at digital illustration because you have the color picker and you can go in there and just physically see like, oh, I'm in the blue range right now. That's why it's looking weird. And then you notch it up to where it's green or wherever it should be.
Hmm.
So much easier. But I got away with it by like, okay, I'm using cyan right now. So I'm mixing cyan.
Oh yeah.
So I know I'm in blue.
Probably. Yeah, it makes you more diligent.
Yeah. I'm doing oil painting now where like I'll get my palettes and I got to remember like, okay, this is crimson red. This is burnt sienna. This is burnt umber, because they all look similar when they're in a gloss.
Yeah.
So I have to remember where everything is. So, but yeah, I don't consider it a handicap or anything. It's just
No,
what it
yeah,
is.
I thought it was super cool learning about that. Because I mean, especially to talk about kind of like what you're up to now in your current artwork, what you've been doing the last couple of years. How would a little bit about that, if you could expand.
Sure. At one point I got into just wanting to kind of do my own stuff. And I don't know, I've always liked monsters. And one of the one of the offices I worked at was right up the street from a place called Halloween Town in Burbank. And we'd get lunch and then we'd walk around there and duck into Halloween Town. And they had cool art books and cool art and, monster stuff, which I loved. So, and I found out they were doing art shows. So I was like, oh, hey, uh, I had done a couple art shows in San Francisco uh, at a gallery, and I did one. It was like a Dark Valentine themed show. So I did like Alfred Hitchcock holding a Valentine that says "Be Mine," and I did Edgar Allan Poe, I think, and the piece is sold, and I sold a bunch of prints. So I had those two, and I had printed up postcards for those, and so I brought those into Halloween Town, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm interested in doing the next art show, and here's my work." And I had like a little website, like a blog that had some of my paintings on it. And the owner of the store got back to me. She's like, "Oh my God, I'd love to have you, and these are great. And also, would you mind if I if we carry the prints of these in our store?" I'm like, absolutely. So, they carry my work there. You can buy prints of a lot of my work there. Um, and so I just started doing stuff like that, and really got into the whole um, fine art world. And so now I'm doing that a lot, and I do a lot of commission paintings now. And um, you know, my work through Stan Winston Studio has let me, opened a lot of doors for me. Being in that monster world, in the monster shop and creature shop kind of place. So, yeah, I just freelance art. and opportunities come up where I just have lucked into other avenues.
Mhm.
Doing a lot of stuff now, like opening credits for film and closing credits for film. The
Oh,
special
cool.
credits at the end of a movie. When they
Yeah.
sometimes do artwork. I've done a handful of those, and my wife and I are now working together on those. She's an art director and graphic designer, and she has done movie posters in her previous careers. Um, so yeah, so she helps out on those and does the design work. I do the illustration work. Some of the movies have been like if you see the end credits for Doolittle with Robert Downey Jr., I
Oh.
did I did a ton of these portrait paintings in in that one. The opening for Clifford, the Big Red Dog. I did these pencil sketches that kind of turn into watercolor and then they turn into the cityscape. And then at the end of the film, I did all the pencil sketches that kind of get painted with watercolor during the closing credits. So yeah, handful of those I've done. I don't want to name all of them. Bore
Sure.
everybody. um, so yeah, just I am very fortunate to be doing stuff I love, and just like I said, I've always been very ambitious. I always try to improve my work and always practicing, always trying to get better.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I can't see myself doing anything else.
Yeah, that's
I don't think I'd be able to.
yeah, that's awesome. I feel the same way.
Unless,
About, I guess, creating stuff.
yeah. Well, I'd say you're on your way, man.
Thank you.
22 and you're already putting together these awesome pieces. So
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
I'm very flattered that I now have, let's see, it was you, Greg. I also spoke a little bit to Tim
Oh,
over
you did?
over email.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess he can't do an
He's
interview just
not
because,
allowed to do interviews apparently.
yeah,
And
which is probably smart.
yeah, he's an asylum in Russia right now. And
Yes. I have heard that.
yeah. And now Molly I guess has also seen it. Because
You
that's,
might be getting a phone call, yeah.
I mean, I'm no, it really is like an honor because
Yeah.
I this might sound funny, but Game Fan was my life for like 6 months. I
Nice.
spent just working on making that whole series, that whole documentary.
Right.
I Besides the people who lived through it, I am probably the world's foremost expert on Game Fan history.
It seems like you found pictures of ECM that I've never seen before. I'm like, wow.
I I found a lot of I would go through people like
Eric
archives
Rollins.
of people's blogs who worked on the website and talked
Yeah.
about stuff. And
No, you did a deep dive. I was impressed. Like a lot of the game cave stuff, I was aware of it. I wasn't involved so much.
mhm.
I knew a lot of the people that were. Um, so yeah, it was kind of interesting hearing some of the information from you.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to hear a couple more stories about the decline of GameFan? Or
If
are
you'd
you?
like to tell them, go ahead.
I mean, this just kind of paints more of a picture, of this some of the stuff that,
Sure.
towards the end, they were doing these contests and giveaways. Like I forget what it was, like subscribe and you can win a Dodge Viper, subscribe, you could win a Triumph motorcycle. And, you know, these prizes were never
Yeah.
given away if you could have guessed. But I think someone got them. There was a Dodge Viper that was supposedly for the contest.
Dave did buy a motorcycle, I think, with someone's paycheck. I think that happened.
Yes, no, it wasn't Halverson. I think it was the other Dave.
Oh, the other day. Okay.
Yeah. Um, there's a lot of Daves that
Yeah.
um, apparently David White was given the opportunity to drive the Dodge Viper, and he took one of his friends in it, and they went through a drive-through, and he scraped the side of the friggin' drive-through thing. That's yeah, wrecked the paint, and so no one else was allowed to drive. I was like, you mother effer! Like I'm a car guy. I would have loved to drive that Viper. Thanks a lot, dude. Thanks a lot. So, but yeah, it was fun. And like I said, during the can't get a paycheck cash period, people would still show up to work, but not a lot of work was getting done. Like me and a handful of guys got into playing Command and Conquer.
Yeah, I heard a lot about that.
Oh yeah, love that game. And so it would be like we get in, all right, okay, all right, me and Jody against so me and Joe against you know Paul and Jody or whoever.
Uh-huh.
So we would do that all day.
Mhm.
Like, all right, we're not getting paid, so we're not really working. So, but like I said, it was kind of sad at the same time.
Yeah, weird mix of emotions.
Yeah, you wanted it to succeed, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things I found interesting about it is it seemed like the way everyone talked about it, there was always this crisscross and of feelings, and
right.
it was
No,
fun, but
there's a lot of people.
it's
Yeah,
fun, but it was stressful, and I met friends, but it would just like it sucked in other ways, and the contrast was really interesting to me.
right. No, I mean, I've met a lot of great people. Like I still talk to Bruce Rubis. We chat, and I still chat with Tim. I would talk with Jody. Jody. He was a production guy. He went on to do strategy guides and books. And I worked with him on a lot of those projects, and I worked with Tim on a lot of his side projects, doing uh, you know game box covers for him. Um, sadly, Jody Seltzer, he passed away a year or two ago. So yeah, it's always kind of crazy when that happens. But anyway, so
Try
yeah,
not to
there's
get too
there's a
down.
handful of people. What's that? Yeah, let's
Don't-
end on a downer. Sorry about that.
yeah, oh.
But I talk to Jay every now and then. I talk to yeah, handful of guys. So
Yeah.
you know, it's fun knowing that I was part of this notorious entity known as Game Fan.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing really like it.
No,
Yeah.
no, not really.
Yeah. Uh,
I've not heard stories about any of those sorts of things.
no, I think I got a comment one time like, "Oh, do one of these for EGM." I'm like, I don't think I could. I don't
Yeah,
think there's enough there. I'm sure something funny happened, but
right. I showed up to work
yeah.
and this guy spilled his coffee. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Oh no. But yeah, there's a lot of, like Monitor being our mascot, want him on the cover. And then soon as CG covers, 3D illustrated covers started coming up, Dave would be like quickly like, we don't need Monitor on the cover. It's like, and the
Yeah.
video game covers companies would say like, well, if you put our game on the cover, we don't want, it to be drawn or painted. We want our art, and we don't want Monitor in there. And so, Dave would cave every time, like, okay, I want that game on the cover. I want to play your game. I think that was most of it. I want to play your game. So
He wants it early.
I want an early copy of the game. So I'll do anything. So yeah, it was crazy. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, it's been really great having you. I'm sure we could probably talk about this all day.
I know. Sorry, I'm probably boring
But
you by
oh no,
now.
it's great. I mean, you mentioning that monitor costume. I've been trying to get my hands on some piece of like game fan memorabilia. Like anytime I go to shows or something, I keep trying to find like a magazine. And
Oh
you
yeah,
saying that is, I'm like, that's the historian in me going, oh, it should be in a museum.
I have a box of the infamous LJB issue, unopened, sealed in the bags.
Oh wow, with the sports column.
Yes, with the
Wow,
bad type in there.
wow.
Well, see, so I know. Here we go. We're on another. Um, yes, placeholder text was used quite frequently,
Okay.
but there wouldn't have been a problem if he just put gobbledygook in there, like placeholder text, placeholder text,
Yeah.
placeholder text. Um, and the sad thing was, it was during the time when Metropolis Publication was just getting Game Fan kind of on its feet again, and like we're gonna do a big special collector's issue to show that we're back, and we're gonna be good, and it's gonna run right. And then that happened.
That's like the genie. It was a collector's edition, but not in the way they
I
wanted.
know, like they couldn't have been more accurate with that. Like it's the only issue we ever put in a poly bag with collector's edition on the front. 'Cause, man, it
That's
was it ever.
crazy.
So
Wow.
maybe I could get you one if you were
I
interested.
I would be over the I'd frame it.
All right. Well, we'll chat after this.
I'd love to. Um
Um, so yeah, that that was very sad. Like, great. Thanks for shooting our foot with that still had some toes left on it. It's like, now there's no toes. No more feet left to shoot.
yeah.
Burn down all the bridges with the printers.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
anyway,
uh that's a funnier note to end on.
there you go.
And is it Wolfinger?
Yeah,
Okay.
I used to go by Wolfinger, so,
Okay.
so you're not wrong.
Whoops. Yeah, I, I
Because,
I've always said Wolfinger to myself.
no,
Changed
no, you're not wrong because my mom growing up would always pronounce it Wolfinger, and my
Yeah.
dad would always say Wolfinger. And my mom's like, I say Wolfinger because I don't like how Wolfinger sounds. Like, okay. So people's like, hey, Terry Wolfinger. It's like, it's Wolfinger. Hey, Wolfinger. And but then, I kind of embraced it, with especially with the monster stuff I do. It just sounds
Oh
fun.
yeah, it's a great
Wolfinger.
name for that.
And my wife designed this cool logo that, is very evil looking, monstery feeling. So yeah, Terry
Okay.
Wolfinger.
All right. Well, it's been an awesome time. Thank you so much for coming on and
You're
agreeing to
welcome.
this. It's been a pleasure. And before we go, where can anyone watching find your stuff? Where are you at?
Let's see. If you go to wolfinger.bigcartel.com, you can see all my monster prints. And I regularly show my work at Monsterpalooza in Pasadena and Burbank. And I'm starting to do other conventions now. I just did CreepyCon in Ontario, California. You can purchase my work at Halloween Town in Burbank, California. Um, and yeah, you can contact me through the Big Cartel site, and I'm open for commissions and whatnot. So yeah.
Okay. Well, everyone be sure to go check out Terry's stuff. uh, you're a wonderfully talented artist
Thank you.
and an important part of the game fan history.
Well, cool. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Hopefully I won't get any phone calls from any Daves after this. I'm sure I
Yeah.
won't.
I'd be surprised. He's off the grid as far as he's alive, but he's off the grid as far as I
Right,
know.
that's all I know too. I was contacted by Julie, I guess his wife now,
Mm.
because I think she wanted to do some work at one of the companies I was working at and maybe heard that I worked there. And she contacted me through LinkedIn and was like, "Oh, do you work at so and so?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I do." I just want to say, like, I don't have any ill will towards Dave.
Hmm.
I really don't. I don't hate him. I was very upset at the time, obviously, but I've put all that behind me. You know, I remember all the stuff that happened, but I guess you could say I've forgiven and moved on. So, and I have bumped into him a couple times at E3, and was pleasant. Didn't try to attack him or anything. So,
Yeah.
just saying that I'm harboring no ill will towards any of the people involved.
Okay.
So,
That's wonderful.
there you go.
Yeah.
My little disclaimer.
All right.
So, hey, thanks again.
Of course. Yeah. I'm gonna hit stop recording